I'm super excited to welcome you to this edition of the program, Ladies Night. My name is Ameze Bazwai. Of course, you can call me the Empress of the Airwaves. Now, on Ladies Night, we get to talk about everything that affects the young woman, regardless political, of course, relationship-wise, and sometimes we delve into sports as well, but basically everything that has to do with a woman, what pertains to a woman, and we focus more on the young woman. Now, I've been doing a series on the topic rape. I've been looking at different aspects of rape for the past 3 weeks. Now, last 2 weeks, I actually had a guest in the building talking about Mabel Adage. Shout out to you. She actually talked about the impact of rape, and she looked at it from the angle of parents, how parents should look out for their kids, signs that they should ensure they look out for in their kids to ensure that these kids are not sexually abused. And of course, we looked at other things, but let me get you a brief snippet of what she had to say for those of us who missed out on the show. This is Mabel Adage with her own piece of thoughts.
Right, yo, I just rated this motherfucker up last night, and I'm the rookie on this all-star team. Me and Kim is getting cream, like Delma and Louis.
Our mothers should be very sensitive, taking care of their female child especially. Fine, the male child also experience this, so you should tell your child should not learn it outside. Like your teacher will not be the one advising your child about harassment or how to avoid sexual stuff. No, now you should be their first teacher on this topic, not someone outside.
She on the mic, the butter pea, honey, got the sugar, got the spice. Roll the L.
Having Mabel Adage was really an eye-opener. Of course, she had a lot to say about how parents should ensure they protect their kids from these predators that actually go out sexually abusing them. And of course, we talked a whole lot about other stuff. So if you missed out, I'm sorry. But anyways, last time on the show, I actually went out to the streets and of course talked to some girls, ladies as well, on their thoughts on the fact that a lot of persons tend to say it was the victim's fault. Okay, they tend to throw blame on the victim and say, if you were not dressed in that way, if you probably were not present at that location at that time, maybe you wouldn't have been targeted. So I went out to find out from persons to see, is it really worth it to blame the victim? Do they have a role to play in the whole scenario? And that's what we talked about last week. I'm not going to let you in on what they said. If you missed out, you missed out. But today on the show, I'm going to be looking at another aspect. I'm going to be talking to two persons today on the show. They'll be joining me live, and most definitely we're going to have a soul time. So today on the show, I'm going to be looking at it from a different angle. I'm going to be looking at the psychological impact that rape has on a victim or on a survivor. I'm going to have two beautiful ladies joining me today, all the way from UK. I have one person, and of course, right here in Benin, I have Dr. Ibinovia Ikponwosa Sherifat. She's the senior registrar at the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital in Benin City.
Thank you, Ameze, for having me on the show.
Joining me from the UK is Miss Kelly Mekonye. She's a geneticist, and she's really passionate about this whole topic. Rape, gender-based violence, domestic violence, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, whatever you call it, anything that has to do with these scenarios. Miss Kelly is really, really passionate about it. I think she actually even volunteered to work with some victims and of course some survivors of such gender-based domestic violence. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. But I'm going to start off with Dr. Igbinovia. Thank you once again for being part of the show. Of course, I'm going to be asking this question. What do you think are the common psychological responses a victim might experience after a rape? Okay, so I know that basically victims go through a lot, but what is the common psychological experience that a victim would experience after rape?
Well, first of all, they are in shock. They are in disbelief. This has happened to them, they never expected it, and they are at that point where they cannot understand what has happened, or they do understand, but they're still in shock. They can feel numbness. They're so, they have no emotional responses at that time, or they might have overwhelming surge of emotional responses. These individuals are prone to anxiety, so they have nightmares, they have palpitations, they are unduly anxious, they are fearful. They can have low self-esteem at that point. They are also prone to suicidal tendencies. They want to take their life. This tragedy has occurred. They feel that's the end of the road and they want to take their life. They are also prone to going through the 5 stages of grief, where we have denial, anger, bargaining about the situation, depressive symptoms, and then they finally accept what has happened to them. They are also prone to acute stress reactions, which can occur from traumatic events, and then it could last for about a week. So these are some of the immediate reactions that can occur. And let's not forget about stigma. So they have self-stigma, they have stigma from the society, and these are some of the issues that could happen after sexual assault.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Igbinovia. I'm going to pass the same question to Ms. Kelly. What do you think are the common immediate psychological responses a victim might experience after rape?
Absolutely. So before I go into that, I would like to really talk about what rape actually is. Rape is basically unwanted sexual interaction between 2 individuals. Basically, someone has said no and you refuse to take their no, and you proceed with that sexual interaction. You have raped that person. I also would like to add that rape consent can be withdrawn at any point, and proceeding after consent has been withdrawn is rape. So even while you're in the middle of sex or any sexual interaction and someone says stop or no and you still continue, that is rape. Also, if you coerce someone, so someone has said no and you keep on coercing them, if you do get your way with them, that is also sexual abuse, and that is rape because the person has already said no. So now that I have defined that, I'm able to talk about some of the immediate psychological responses that survivors could encounter, and one of them is shame, guilt. Anger is another one, anxiety, depression, and some women even get suicidal thoughts because, like I said, rape is a gross violation of an individual, and we live in a society where women or survivors are usually blamed for what was done to them, and so those things lead to feeling of guilt, feeling of shame, feeling of embarrassment, when really it was not their fault, right? No one asks to be sexually abused, no one asks to be raped, and so that's something that we as a society we need to do better at. We need to stop victim blaming. No matter how slight, no matter how small you think it is, it doesn't help. Anger is another one because obviously someone has taken from you something you did not give them permission to take. And just as you will be angry if someone stole your property, is the same way somebody will be angry when they have been violated. Another one that comes to mind is feeling of denial. Some women don't even accept or are unable to accept that this has happened to them, and it's a trauma response, right? So these are just a few of the more immediate psychological effects or responses that survivors have. We also talk about the physical things like bruising, right? Bruising, for example, like that pain. Diseases, the risk of STIs, because those are also bad. Unwanted pregnancy is another, well, not immediate, but it's another effect of rape.
Okay, before I let you go, Ms. Kelly, let's talk about the long-term psychological effects of rape. I know we have post-traumatic syndrome, we have depression, we have anxiety. Do you think there are any other areas that we should be looking at? What are the long-term psychological effects of rape on a victim?
Absolutely. Yes, those are a few long-term effects. And I would like to preface this by saying I'm not like a therapist or a psychologist or anything, but I'm someone who is really passionate about this, and I've done research and I've had conversations with people in this space. And these are like the things that were just mentioned. PTSD, anxiety, and depression are a few of long-term effects that survivors face. PTSD, because rape is a traumatic event, right? And for people that don't know, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. And so triggers, even things like smell, things like sounds could trigger and make like survivors relieve that traumatic experience. Depression for sure, based off of accumulation of those short-term like immediate effects we spoke about previously, and when those things are not handled well and the survivor is kept in a very toxic environment, it could lead to that, because they've not been given the right tools, the right space to process what was done to them. And this is why, again, I'm going to reiterate that victim blaming is a no-no, because victim blaming just makes the person feel worse about something they had no control over because they didn't, right? And so we have to always remember that when we're dealing with survivors, you have to be empathetic, you have to be kind, you have to be understanding. It's not their fault. Something really, really bad happened to them. And it takes a while. Like, it stays with you. It doesn't really leave. It stays with you. The mental part, right? For sure. And we live in a world where even when people try to get justice, it's not so clear-cut, right? Rape is also very difficult to prove, and the law is not really helpful in those situations. The law is not really helpful, and the law makes excuses for abusers. We see it happen all the time, right? I don't have to name names, but if you Google it, you go on the internet, you see like a lot of popular big names or whatever like have been linked to that, and a lot of times the the survivors don't get any justice, So, and that's even something they taught us during the training when I was working as the crisis line worker, that a lot of time victims don't get justice. The statistics are there. And yeah, so those are just a few of the long-term effects of rape.
Wow, amazing. It's really sad what victims have to go through, victims of rape, if I may say. Anyways, let's hear from Dr. Egbinovia. Do you agree with Ms. Kelly on this long-term psychological effects of rape? I mentioned PTSD, I mentioned depression, I mentioned anxiety. What do you think victims go through psychological?
Okay, for the long-term psychological impact of sexual assault, the first thing that we need to know is most of these individuals are prone to major depressive illnesses, so they come down with that. They have anxiety disorders, and we can see from panic disorders to generalized anxiety disorders to post-traumatic stress disorders, as well as specific phobias. These individuals are prone to them, and they are also likely to come down with substance use disorders. They're trying to cope with the tragedy that has occurred. They're trying to cope with the stressors and the new normal, and then they might have a maladaptive coping mechanism by using psychoactive substance, alcohol, over-the-counter medications, and many more that are in the market. They are also prone to adjustment disorders. They're trying to adjust to whatever new status that they have. Remember that they're prone to sexually transmitted infections. Some of them would have gone through physical assault before it occurred. So adjustment disorder is one of the things that they can experience. And then for the children, sexual abuse or sexual assault poses them as a risk of coming down with a severe psychological illness in the future. So these children are prone to conduct disorders, they are prone to mood disorders, bipolar affective disorders. And these are some of, just to mention a few of the long-term complications that can arise. They could also have acute stress disorders. You know, I said acute stress reaction would have panned out for a week, but acute stress disorders would last for about a month or more. So these are just some of the highlights that they can experience. There are a whole lot that can happen, but these are some of them that could occur in the long term for people who have experienced sexual assault and sexual abuse.
Okay, let me throw you away from that one now, Dr. Igbinovia. We are looking at victims now, and a lot of them, we have established that they have these psychological effects on their mindsets, on their relationships and all that with people. Now, do you think that rape can affect a victim's relationship with family, friends, and of course, intimate partners? I know I've watched a movie, or I'm actually following a series lately because I'm doing a lot of research so that I can, of course, know what to talk about on the show. And this particular movie, I think a particular episode, okay, there was a young lady who was raped, and she did not want her husband to touch her anymore. Okay, so I don't know, is it a general thing? Does this happen to all victims of rape? Does it affect their relationship with family, with friends, and of course with their intimate partners?
Yes, definitely. People who have experienced sexual assault, sexual abuse, they have challenges. They could have challenges with their relationship with themselves, their families, and the community at large. We have come to see that over time, when somebody is sexually abused, instead of helping these individuals, they are more at the receiving end of stigma, and then people tend to want to overanalyze, and then they say, for instance, if it was a female, maybe she was scantily dressed or she was provocatively dressed, and that is why this has occurred. Or they would say, what were you doing there at that time? It doesn't give them any right to be sexually abused. It doesn't give the perpetrators the right to, do that. But then that's what the society would do, would not shun the act, but rather would victimize the victim in court. And so this doesn't really help with the relationship that individuals who are become victims have with their families and their loved ones and their communities. And because there's a whole cascade of a psychological process that is going on, it begins to affect every other part of their lives. And so that's why we emphasize that they seek help and they try to talk about it so they can move on and they can adjust and understand what exactly is happening, and that it is not abnormal to experience all that they're experiencing, and that they can be okay even after the trauma that they've experienced.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Igbinovia. Now, I can see the fire in Miss Kelly's eyes. I told you earlier on the show that she is really passionate about this particular topic. So tell us, Miss Kelly, victims' relationship with family, friends, intimate partners, is it affected after they go through that nasty ordeal?
Absolutely. Rape can affect relationship with close loved ones of survivors. And I like to use the word survivors because I believe if you survived something as traumatic as sexual assault and rape, you are a survivor. And I believe that words matter. And so I like to use the word survivor. So if you hear me say survivor instead of victim, or correct myself, that is just me trying to use a language that I feel is more appropriate for individuals that belong to this category. So yes, it can definitely affect, because like I mentioned earlier, shame and guilt are some of the immediate psychological effects that one could face after rape. And if you are surrounded by friends and family members that are judgmental, that are not empathetic, that are not kind, that victim blame, survivors could end up withdrawing from them. And also even when they have the support system around them, because again, we live in a world where victims have been shamed, right? Survivors carry that guilt, that shame, and that makes it, I don't know if that makes it hard for them to open up sometimes, and so they could withdraw and like isolate themselves from family, from friends. Let's not also forget like the longer term effect, things like depression and anxiety, social anxiety could even prevent them from wanting to go out. So they don't want to hang out with friends anymore. They don't want to hang out with family. They just want to be indoors by themselves. So yes, definitely it does affect individuals like physically, mentally, socially. It is a really, really bad, to me it's the worst thing somebody could do to another human being, because it stays with you. Like even when the scars are gone, even when the bruises are gone, the fact that someone took that from you, the fact that someone didn't respect you enough to just like back off when you told them to stop, it never really leaves. And it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of like, it's a lot to work through that and to process that. And it's always, everyone reacts to things differently. So yeah, but yes, absolutely, for sure, rape does affect or could affect the relationship of loved ones, closed ones of survivors, and their relationship with survivors, for sure.
Okay, let me go back to Dr. Igbinovia. Thank you so much, Ms. Kelly. Let's go back to Dr. Igbinovia. I would like to know, we earlier established the fact that most victims need to see a psychologist, need to see someone who can counsel them, okay, and help them out of the trauma they've gone through. Now, what therapy or what types of therapy would you prescribe are most effective for helping rape victims recover from this trauma?
Yes, for the therapies, there are a whole lot of therapies that these individuals can assess. I would want to make people know that the therapies are not generalized, they are individualized. They're tailored to the specific needs of each and every one that needs the therapy. So some of the therapies that they can go through is counseling, basic counseling, that's one. They could have trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. They could have individualized psychotherapy, as well as psychodynamic psychotherapy. And then we also have group therapies, which are some form of support group therapies, where you have people who have experienced similar abuse, and then they are all in one group, and then they talk about how they could help themselves, how this has affected their lives, and how they can go on moving on with their lives. So the therapy is endless depending on the specific needs of the individual. And if they now come down with a major psychological illness, other therapies can also be introduced, as well as medications if the need arises. So yes, these are some of the therapies that they can have.
All right, Ms. Kelly, any thoughts or any additions, any subtractions? What types of therapy are most effective for helping rape victims, of course, recover from their trauma?
That's a really good question, and I like that you're asking that question. So as I said earlier, I'm going to repeat myself. I am not like a licensed therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist or none of that. However, like I've done a lot of research and have interacted with survivors, and so something that came up a lot in my research was cognitive-based therapy, CBT, which basically helps survivors to like reframe negative thoughts, and also help to arm them with healthy coping mechanisms, because again, like I said earlier, the mental stigma doesn't really ever go, but because you're a survivor, you can learn to deal with it, because there is indeed life after sexual abuse, there's life after rape. It doesn't have to define you, it doesn't have to define your existence. Like taking your power back is something that is really important, and CBT can help survivors with that. Also, like group therapy is also a nice one, because that helps survivors feel less alone, because then you realize, hold on a minute, it's not just me, right? And that feeling of like I'm not the only one that this has happened to, and knowing that there is a support system out there, there are a group of people who are going through the same thing, that are trying to navigate and move on and heal from this horrible experience might provide some survivors with a sense of comfort and belonging. So those are a few things that I definitely think could help, or it's really important that you talk to someone, a trusted person, a professional. Most like, I think, is more ideal because they are equipped with the tools to help you. But I do know that we live in a world where therapy is not very accessible. So like confiding in someone, I don't know, and some people may disagree with me, which is fine, but I find that confiding with with people that are truly trustworthy and people that will create that, people that have created a safe space for you, right, and would help. But I would not advise people to handle it and internalize it on their own, because it is hard, and you need a village, you need a support system just to help you feel sane. Because like a lot of women have, like, for lack of better expression, lost their minds because of what happened to them. Like, it's so bad. So women start to even harm themselves as a way to cope with what has happened to them. So women live in denial. They just don't accept that this happened to them, because it's easier for them to live that way than for them to accept the fact that somebody did that to them. That is how bad rape is. It is such a bad thing, and I don't even like how we live in a world where it is even kind of sort of downplayed, if I'm being honest, because it is, to me, the worst thing somebody could do to another human being.
Wow, very insightful, very insightful. I really buy into that last opinion that you just gave. Anyways, let's move on because time is fast spent. Now, can you tell us, Ms. Kelly, what steps can be taken to help victims overcome feelings of self-blame and, of course, address societal stigma? I think that's one thing that a lot of rape victims go through. How can rape victims regain a sense of control, okay, and empowerment? How do they reboost their self-esteem, especially in their day-to-day lives?
So great, that's a great question, loaded but great question. So I'm going to take the first part, which is what can we do for survivors. And I think that as a society, this is a joint effort. This is not just on survivors to do for themselves. This is on each and every one of us, because society is what created that stigma. Like you said, societal stigma. It was not made by one person. It wasn't made by victims and sorry, by survivors. It was made by the society. And so the society got to fix it. And so the first thing, or the most important thing, not the first, but the most important thing, is to stop victim blaming. Just resist the urge to victim blame. I know it's hard for many people, but resist the urge to victim blame. Also resist the urge to doubt victims. Rape is very hard to prove. Believe victims, right? And we live in a world where rape is underreported. It is underreported because of this societal stigma. And so when people have come to speak out, believe victims. Believe them. There's no need to try to poke holes in their story. Why would you do that? Like, nobody brings up false accusations when we're talking of things like murder. But when it comes to sexual assault, for some reason, everybody, their mama talks about false accusations, when we know like the rate of false accusation is much less lower than a genuine account. So let's stop that. Let's stop punishing majority of survivors, right, because of, I don't know, a minority. Like, and I know that sounds weird, but I hope people can understand what I'm trying to say. It's not fair to keep using that 2%, that false accusation, as a way to invalidate victims, because many a times victims even come with evidence and the goalpost still keeps moving. And these are things that contribute to that stigma. These are things that contribute to societal stigma that makes survivors, number one, not even want to speak out. Number two, that makes survivors feel like there's something wrong with them, like it's their fault. Look to the perpetrator, because the perpetrator made a choice, made a decision to take something that did not belong to them from someone, to violate somebody else. And that is where the focus should be on. So that's one. Education as well, educating ourselves on sexual assault, on rape, on, like, so that people, because a lot of times I hear guys say, oh, I didn't know, or or perpetrators rather say, oh, I didn't know. We know most of the perpetrators are men, but I didn't know. Ignorance is no excuse. Read, like, educate yourself. Do not coerce a woman. If a woman has said no, she said no. There is no such thing as stop it, I like it. Let's stop that. Let's stop it, I like it as an excuse. Because this is what, and again, something I forgot to mention earlier, something called stealthing is rape. And stealthing is when a man takes off a condom, right, in between, like, the sexual act, right, and continues without the permission or the knowledge of the person they're engaging in, that is rape, because the person did not consent to unprotected sexual contact, and then here you are making decisions on your own. Also, respecting women. I think patriarchy, misogyny has really contributed to why, and let's not play games. We know that most of the victims of rape are women, right? Most of the people on the other end are women and children, which are marginalized folks. And if people respected women and people stopped seeing women as property or as something put on earth for the satisfaction and entertainment of the male folk, like that is a step in the right direction. Because then you respect a woman's agency, her autonomy enough to back off when she says back off. So those are like a few things I think that we as a society, we can do. We can definitely do more. We can do more. We can review laws. Why is the law so lenient with perpetrators of rape? It's quite lenient. Even our Nigerian constitution, it is quite lenient. So let's look at these things. In our Nigerian constitution, a man can legally be his wife in the Northern Penal Code. That is a constitution. That is a constitutional document. I am not a lawyer, but I believe that is what it is. These are laws that blatantly tell society we don't respect women. We don't respect what happens to women. So respecting women, recognizing the humanity of women is something that we need to do as a society. Women matter. Women issues are human issues. Educate yourselves. As you're speaking to your daughter to remain a virgin and to not be sexually promiscuous, speak to your son as well. No means no. Period. No is a full sentence. And I don't need to explain my no. If I've said no, you're asking me why no. You're already headed down the rapey path. Respectfully. So those are just a few things that we as a society can do for survivors. Then on the other flip side, what survivors can do for themselves to help them overcome feelings of guilt and for them to like help with their healing. Like I mentioned earlier, therapy is great. You have to get your power back. Because what happened to you was horrible. It was unspeakable. It was dehumanizing. But you're here. You survived. There is indeed life after being sexually abused. There is life after being raped. And there are tools out there. I used to volunteer for an organization, a Nigerian organization called Stand to End Rape Initiative. They have so many tools, so many panels, so many programs. They have a legal team that even helps to represent women. So you can reach out to organizations like that, like the NGOs. If we do at some point have an up and coming Ministry of Women's Affairs, those are places like on the national level. I know in Lagos, from what I've heard, the domestic violence people, they do a great job. So you can reach out to them. You can reach out to, like I mentioned, group therapy, healing with other people that have been in that same situation. It helps. So yeah, those are just a few things. And just be patient with yourself. I think the most important thing is for you to be patient with yourself, to forgive. There's nothing to really forgive yourself, but I know that many many survivors feel that anger towards themselves, that guilt, that shame. Forgive yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't put yourself in that situation. You didn't put yourself in that situation. People are in their homes and they get raped. People are kids and they get raped. Babies and infants get raped. Reverend sisters get raped. People that wear hijab and cover themselves from head to toe, they get raped. So there is nothing that you did. There is nothing that you wore. There is no place that you went where you gave up the vibe, where you invited, where you tricked, where you manipulated, where you gave off rape me vibes. And I want every survivor listening to this to know that it is not your fault. You will overcome this, and this does not define you. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Igbenobia, same question goes to you. How do you think rape victims can regain their normal lives? How do they address societal stigma? How do they regain a sense of control? How do they get rid of those feelings of self-blame? Because a lot of them go through that. We already established that. Sometimes they say it's because I did this, it's because I did that. And even society blames them as well. So how do they gain or regain a sense of control and, of course, empowerment in their lives?
My advice for these individuals is, in order to reclaim your life, in order to get yourself back, you need to seek help. You need to speak up. You can't stay silent, because most times you internalize all that has happened. You are struggling with, your new normal. So you need to seek help. You need to speak out. We have the hospitals open, arms open for as many that need help, and they can come and seek therapy. And that's the only way you can take back what has been taken from you. Some people say I can overcome it. Yes, they do, but then post-traumatic stress disorder is real. Your relationships going forward can be affected. Your work-life balance can be affected. And so for us to be able to make sure that you are a functioning individual who is mentally stable, who is balanced, you need to seek help every time or any time it occurs. You need to seek help. You need to report it so that it doesn't go on, and if it has stopped, so that you can rebuild your life. So yes, that's the way they can be able to.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Igbinovia. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough. And of course, Miss Kelly, for joining me all the way from the United Kingdom. Wonderful thoughts, wonderful comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ameze, for having me.
And I really hope my audience actually got a thing or two from this. It is traumatic to go through such an experience. I do not wish it even for my enemy. And I hope that with my little package for the past 3 weeks, I've been able to enlighten parents, enlighten the society generally on this particular sensitive topic, rape, sexual abuse, sexual harassment. It is something we need to kick out of society in the nearest of time, okay? In the nearest of time, because a lot of young girls, a lot of young ladies, and even men, like we established last week on the show, some men get raped, some boys get raped. It is something that we need to look out for. As parents, we need to be very vigilant so our kids don't go through this. And don't wait for your kid to go through the worst before you notice these things. Don't wait for them to keep telling you, see what they're going through, and then you're not even bothered about it, or you shut them down. I think Mabel Adagi talked about that last 2 weeks on the show. We need to stop rape in our society. We need to say no to rape. Once again, thank you so much to my two amazing guests who joined me on the show. Dr. Igbinovia Igbonwusa Sherifat, of course, from the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital right here in Benin, and definitely from the United Kingdom, Miss Kelly Mekunye. My name is Ameze Bazwai. I will not be talking about rape next week, but I'll be talking about something that you definitely enjoy. So if I were you, I would surely be a part of the show. Thank you so much once again for being a part.